Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm jumping on today because I want to talk to you about a concept that I often refer to. You might have heard me talking about this concept in the past. It's a concept that I call the relationship trap. So today I want us to unpack that concept a little bit and understand why this particular trap that so many women get caught in is so important for understanding how to optimize our relationships. So, we're going to talk today about the relationship trap. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how to get unstuck from this trap. So, I often talk about the idea that in order to build better relationships as women, we need to break our tendency to keep silent. And what I mean by that is we have a tendency, particularly as women, as we navigate our relationships, we really struggle with asking for what we need. We struggle with saying no. We often struggle with setting and maintaining boundaries. So these are some of the common areas that I will see time and time again in the conversations that I have with some of the private clients that I work with, where it's really, really hard to break free from those relationship templates that tell us to be silent in our relationships, or that tell us that it's not okay to disappoint another person, that tell us that it's not okay to say no, it's not okay to set boundaries. And then what ends up happening is over time, the resentment, the bitterness, the anger, the frustration really does build. It really does increase for us. And then it makes it almost impossible for us to show up as our best selves. So, this is a concept, if you've spent any time with me at all, you would have heard me talk about the importance of practicing assertiveness. You would hear me talking often about the importance of showing up really well in our relationships. And part of showing up is having some of those difficult conversations. What I've come to understand in my almost 2 decades of working with people is that this is easier said than done, right? It sounds really great to say, you know what, I'm going to show up as my best self in all of my relationships. I am going to go all in. I'm going to lean into those difficult conversations. I'm going to set boundaries where I need to set them, and I'm going to do the work. But what I've seen time and time again is that this is really, really difficult. And so the question that I want us to unpack and really look at today is, why is this so hard, right? Despite all of the insight that we have around assertiveness, all of the insight that we have around relationship management skills, why does this area continue to be truly the greatest point of stuckness for most women? And so, if you are listening to this today, I want you to really ask yourself, do you get stuck being open, being honest, practicing assertiveness in your relationships? Do you find yourself really pausing and almost avoiding those difficult conversations, right? What happens for you when you think about setting a boundary in your relationships? What happens for you when you think about renegotiating a boundary in one of your relationships? What happens for you when you think about making a choice that might disappoint or let another person down? I want you to really hold these concepts in your mind as we move through today's teaching. So, as I said earlier on when I started, I want to introduce you to a concept that I use particularly with my private clients. I use it inside my signature program, the EQ code, and the concept that I use is called the relationship trap, or I've called it the relationship trap. It's a concept that I've come up with. So, what is the relationship trap? The relationship trap for me is the correlation between three concepts. It's the correlation between anxiety, confidence, and intimacy. So I'm going to say that again in case you are taking notes. This might be a teaching that you may want to take some notes on. So the relationship trap, as I've come to understand it, is the correlation between three particular concepts that intersect in a pretty powerful way for women. And if we're not careful, that intersection and that impact for us can be quite negative. It can be quite problematic. The three concepts, again, are anxiety, confidence, and intimacy, anxiety, confidence, and intimacy. And let me briefly go over how these pieces actually intersect. So, what happens for us is the first thing that happens, I should back up and say that the first thing that happens, and this is the first sort of discovery that I made in my work with women. So I would say probably over a decade ago, as I was working with women, I realized that there was a very strong connection or correlation for us between our anxiety or our levels of anxiety and our ability to feel confident. Okay. So I realized and recognized that there was a strong correlation between these two concepts. And let me tell you what I noticed in my work with people and truly what I noticed in my own life. And so as I share this particular concept with you, again, I want you to ask yourself if this resonates. I want you to ask yourself if you can relate to this. And I want you to begin to pinpoint and identify those times in your life where you may have been caught in this correlation in a negative way. So here's how it works. I want you to think of a teeter totter. You know those teeter totters that, kids play on in the playground. I want you to think of a teeter totter. And so what happens is our anxiety and our confidence are correlated as if they were on a teeter totter. I want you to imagine what happens when your anxiety goes up. So, when your anxiety increases, so one side of that teeter totter comes up, what happens is our confidence decreases. Our confidence comes down. So, again, think of that teeter totter analogy. If your anxiety is really high, typically what happens is your confidence is really low. So that's the first part of the correlation and connection that I identified in working with women. And this was probably over a decade ago. And then as I became more and more fascinated and more interested in really helping women not only manage their anxiety and build their confidence, but I became almost obsessed with figuring out how to then take that particular concept and translate it into our relationships. So, how do we manage our anxiety and how do we build our confidence in such a way that we are actually able to build greater levels of intimacy in our relationships? And so this is when I discovered the third piece of the puzzle for me, right? So stay with me. So first we've got increased anxiety decreases our confidence. And then what happens from there is when we are existing and when we are operating and when we are navigating life from a place of increased anxiety and decreased confidence, what ends up happening is that this then impacts negatively our ability to build intimacy in our relationships, right? So, this for me is the connection. The more anxious we feel, the less confident we feel. And the less confident we feel, the less we are able to actually build intimacy in our relationships. It is harder for us to access those relationship management skills. It's harder for us to show up well in our relationships, right? So when I began to work with this particular concept, when I identified, oh my gosh, there is this trap that women find themselves stuck in again and again and again when it comes to their relationships. And if you've spent any time with me at all, you would know that I, on a very, very deep level, believe that the quality of our lives is tied to the quality of our relationships. The quality, guys, I want you to think about this. The quality, I believe, of our lives is tied, it's connected, it is correlated with the quality of our relationships. I believe that one of the biggest threats to mental health, particularly for women, is our inability to navigate our relationships well. I'm going to say that again because it's, for me, such a powerful, powerful truth, right? That I don't think we've been taught. I don't think that we have been taught and told, and I don't think the light has been truly shone on this area, this idea that truly the biggest threat to our mental health as women is not often those things that we think of, depression, anxiety, and those diagnoses. And listen, I'm not saying that those things don't exist. They absolutely do. But if you're listening today, I want you to really think about, When my relationships are in distress, what happens to my mental health? When my relationships are suffering, when I'm struggling to figure out how the heck to navigate my relationships, what happens to my mental health? And I would almost bet that the answer is going to be that when your relationships are in distress, it negatively impacts your mental health. It decreases your mental health. It decreases your happiness, your joy, your sense of confidence, and your sense of competence. Right. So this for me became the really a really powerful, important, and foundational concept for all the work that I began doing over the last decade. And I discovered this concept about a decade into my work with people and about a decade into my time practicing. Right. So I kind of spent half my career figuring this out. And then I've spent the last half of my career really helping women understand this concept, but also to action the strategies and the skills to get unstuck from the relationship trap. And so let me tell you a little bit about how. How do we get unstuck from the relationship trap, right? So if we know and understand that confidence, anxiety, and intimacy are correlated, right? Confidence, anxiety, and intimacy are correlated. Then we know that we need a strategic way, a framework, a methodology to actually get unstuck from these different elements. And you know that I think you know. If you've spent time with me, I shouldn't assume. This might be your first time here. This might be our first time connecting and engaged in this conversation. So if that's the case, let me explain. If you've spent any time with me, you will know that there are three concepts that I talk about all the time. I talk about these three concepts because for me, these three concepts are absolutely foundational in helping you transform your relationships and live the type of life that you desire. So, the three concepts are I'll start with the first one, mindset. Right? Mindset is really all about building your confidence and decreasing your anxiety. That first part of the relationship trap, the first correlation, the first connection that we talked about, right? So for me, mindset is not about mantras. You've heard me say it before. It is not about toxic positivity, right? It's not about fake it till you make it. It is none of those tactics for me. Mindset for me is doing the really deep work in reprogramming your brain so that you're able to actually decrease your levels of anxiety. You're able to manage your anxiety and increase your levels of confidence. That for me is what I call mindset mastery. And in fact, inside the EQ code, we have an entire pillar of care around mindset mastery. We go really deep on how to actually master your mindset for long term sustainable change. Right. So we start with mindset. For me, that's the foundational pillar of care. That's where I start with anybody that I work with. We start with really mastering your mindset so you can decrease your anxiety, increase your confidence, and get that foundation. The next concept and the next pillar of care for me, which is I consider this second concept the bridge that takes us to the final concept. So just stay with me. I'm going to get there. The second concept is what I would call learning how to communicate with confidence. And in fact, that is what that pillar of care is called inside my signature program. It's called Communicate with Confidence. So, communicating with confidence is all about being able to communicate assertively. Not passively, not passive aggressively, and not aggressively. So, we go really deep on those concepts inside the work that I do, right? But the second pillar of care that I really want you to understand is once you have mastered your mindset, you've worked on decreasing your anxiety, increasing your confidence, then it's time to put those ideas, those strategies, those concepts into practice and show up in your relationships differently. And how do you do that? You do that by learning how to communicate assertively, learning how to communicate directly, learning how to communicate openly and honestly, right? So that's a second concept. That's a second pillar of care. That's the second stepping stone, if you will, that's going to help you really improve the quality of your relationships. The third and final concept is what I would consider really, how do we build better connections in our life? How do we build, and what I call it in my signature program is authentic connections? How do we show up fully, transparently, with authenticity, with courage in all of our relationships? And so the relationship management piece for me is all about really practicing and implementing how to say no. How do you set a boundary? Once you've set that boundary, how do you maintain that boundary when other people are pushing back? How do you begin to shift the pattern of over functioning that so many women are caught in, right? How do we begin to negotiate our relationships and redefine our relationships so that we're truly improving the quality of said relationships, right? So, that for me is that final pillar of care. And what I've learned in my work together is that where most approaches, where most methodologies, where most frameworks for change, um, where they kind of fall short and where they miss the mark is that there's loads and loads of insight out there. There's loads and loads of information out there. But what is often missing are the specific strategies and the skills practice to actually help us do it, right? So I want you to remember these three pieces. It's the combination of mindset, communication, and relationship management skills that's really going to ultimately get us out of the relationship trap and allow us to move towards building relationships that last. So, if you are joining me here inside the EQ Lab and you're watching this video, you know that I am running a relationship boot camp. I was going to call it a relationship boot camp. I am running the Confidence Boot Camp starting on Monday, February 15th, all the way to Friday, February 19th. And in that 5-day training, what you're going to get is access to some of the core foundations that I teach inside of my signature program. So for 5 days, I'm going to be training you and coaching you live right here inside this group. And I'm going to teach you how to actually build your confidence. How to show up in such a way with confidence and courage so that you're actually able to increase the levels of intimacy in your relationships. I want you to feel confident as you move through your relationships. I want you to feel like you know how to navigate those relationships. And why am I so interested in that? It's because I have come to understand and I've come to know on a very deep level that our relationship satisfaction, the success that we experience in our relationships is so deeply connected to how we feel about ourselves. So, guys, if you are inside this group and you haven't yet registered for the Confidence Boot Camp, I want you to register. The training, the coaching, all of it happens here, but you need to register in order to get the workbook. I have prepared a 15-page workbook for you. What is today? February 9th. It is going to be delivered tomorrow to your inbox. So February 10th, tomorrow, all of the workbooks go out. They're going to land in your inbox. It is 15 pages. I'm going to work through that workbook with you. We're going to fill it out together, and that is going to be your little manual, your little confidence Bible, if you will. And that's what we're actually going to use to put into action the strategies and the skills that we are using. All right, guys, let me pop into the group to actually I have not checked in here at all. If you have any questions, if you have any comments at all with regards to anything that I've shared today, if you have any questions about the Confidence Bootcamp, I know some of you have reached out and said to me, I can't attend live. Is that okay? Absolutely okay. Just make sure that you set aside time every single day to review the content so that you can keep up with us, you can track with us, you can fill out that workbook, you can ask any questions that you have. And chances are, if we do get a whole lot of questions, I might actually tack on an additional day to just do a full Q&A session for you. So that would likely happen over the weekend, the Saturday or the Sunday. So even if you can't attend during the week live, there will probably be a bonus opportunity for us to do another session over the weekend. And hopefully you can attend then. All right, guys, I'm so glad that you joined me today. I want you to have an amazing day, and I will see you. I'll be back here on Thursday for the EQ Skills Clinic. Have a great day, guys.